I'm kind of not as familiar on ketosis, and I'm also kind of like, I feel like everything breaks ketosis from like what you read and stuff like that. Can you explain it a little bit?
Right. Now, there's conflicting understandings of how you do ketosis. There is what's called a cyclical ketogenic diet versus a adapted ketogenic diet. Basically, the way ketones work in the body is that they're replacing glucose. So when glucose levels are extremely low, the body produces ketones in the place of them, and they're produced in the brain. So you have a different level of mental acuity, you do feel a little sharper, and they serve as an energy function as well. What you want to think of as far as numbers, if you go above 30 grams of carbohydrates, that's the typical litmus test. That's the typical marker in which most people will say that you bump yourself out of ketosis. So another thing to think about, I would say two major things would be, don't surpass 30 grams of carbohydrates.
Per day?
Per day, correct.
Okay.
Now, another thing to keep in mind is that if you're used to taking in these monstrous amounts of protein, which some other supplement companies or people will tell you that is beneficial to you, if you're exceeding 200, 300, even 400 grams of protein, what your body will then in turn do is go into a process called gluconeogenesis, which means it's going to create glucose out of the protein. The excess protein that can't be stored in your muscle tissue is in turn going to become glucose, which will then kick you out of ketosis. So that's definitely something that you want to avoid, is just because you don't have the carbohydrates in your system, that's where you want to be replacing it with dietary fat, as opposed to just going absolutely crazy and eating as much protein as possible.
What about vegetables? Because, I mean, if you have too many vegetables, you're going to go out of ketosis.
Well, you're going to maintain a level of ketosis unless you're taking in a over-the-top amount of vegetables. Usually cruciferous vegetables, green vegetables, hard stuff that has phosphate in it, like broccoli, things like cauliflower. They're going to have a considerable amount of fiber as well. So that fiber is going to act almost as a buffer to the amount of carbohydrates that you're taking in. To take in over 30 grams of carbohydrates from vegetables, I'm not the biggest fan of eating salad all day. It's going to take a lot of vegetables for you to blast through that 30 grams.